You are on mute, Roger. We cannot hear you.
You're absolutely right. I was very disciplined. I put it on mute. Now I'm back. I was just saying that financial literacy is not only central, it's strategic. Nothing happens without financial literacy. And the financial literacy in Europe, and I say in Europe, is damnly poor. How can it be? We are not in the central part of Africa. We are in continental Europe with miserable financial literacy. It's 18% of people of Europe have a decent to high level of financial literacy. Sounds somewhere absurd. And this has to be fixed. And if we do not fix it, we go damnly to the wall. Now, the good point will be, what do you mean with that? It means that we should take very active measures, urgent measures, to bring financial literacy to the secondary school, which begins at the age of 12. It doesn't begin at 25, it begins at 12. I'm very clear with my number, because if we don't do it at 12, how will the European citizens understand at the age of 25 that they have to have their main focus on retirement and pension schemes? Because this is what has to happen. If you think about your pension problems at the age of 40, forget it. It's too old. It's far too late. You have to begin with this at the age of 25. And there is a lot to do. School play a very important role. It's amazing. Where do we see these big efforts? I mentioned probably some initiatives, these famous museums for kids. There's a great museum in Vienna, in Austria, which is put in place by the Erste Foundation, where schools go and get the message. Something is equivalent in Italy. We have something with the Swiss National Bank in Switzerland, but we have too little effort. All this has to be done. These people need to understand. And if they don't understand, we will never go forward. And they do not understand that we are in front of a unique problem, which never happened so far and will probably not happen again. And this problem is my huge stress. And I like to communicate this stress in a quite clear way. Is the baby boomers are now all going to the end of entering retirement. The very last baby boomer will go on retirement in 2030, in 4 years. A huge cohort of people going away. And who is now here in the active workforce? Very small cohorts of people. Look, young guys, young couples, they do not make children anymore. Look at Italy, look at everywhere. We have a major problem. We are going against a wall. And what makes me damnly completely lost, and I do not understand, I see that large parts of Europe are still completely based on pillar one. And that makes me amazingly afraid, because we go against the wall. And what this means, creates a wall, against the wall, means that we are at the border to create an amazing European new poverty, with people who believe somewhere, trust in God as they trust in the pillar one, and the pillar one will come to a limit. And this is, for me, a very big concern. I want to be very clear now, entering directly pension. I'm a strong advocate of the three-pillar system. Pillar one is based on redistribution. And so what the young people to pay goes directly to the elderly retired. That's a pillar one. Pillar two is a famous pillar where you pay your money. It's organized by the employer. The employer takes care of this. It is something that you begin as soon as you begin to work, statistically between 23 and 25 in Europe at the end of your study. Pillar number three, the one you also have to begin at 25, begin your pillar three at 25, because if you don't, it's far too late. And all this, I give very, very clear messages, because, you know, it's amazing. I'm spending my life between Switzerland and Luxembourg, and I was talking about this, preparing a little bit this panel discussion. And a lot of people do not even know the existence of the third pillar, which is called 111 bis. How can we ignore at the age of 50, 55, the existence of Pillar 111 bis. This makes me very afraid. And that's why this webinar is very good. We should make a wake-up call out of this webinar. That's what I wanted to say. It's a very clear message, but I will continue with very clear messages.
Thank you very much, Roger, for your very insightful remarks. Now let's turn to Matti. So, Matti, fragmentation remains a key structural weakness of European capital markets, and this limits pension funds' ability to allocate capital efficiently across borders. As Pensions Europe has highlighted, deeper market integration is essential to mobilize long-term savings and to support competitiveness. At the same time, occupational pensions are closely linked to national social and labor frameworks, and this makes diversity a defining feature of European systems. So in this context, how can the EU deepen capital market integration and supervisory convergence without undermining proportionality and member state competence in pension policy?
Thank you, Andrea. Good questions. So let me start with the simple reality. You cannot build capital markets without capital, and pension funds are a key source of that capital. So these European Union's flagship project, the Savings and Investment Union, it is moving in the right direction, but it risks focusing too much on the market's architecture and not enough on the foundations for the market, which are pension systems. On integration, the EU should be ambitious but targeted. We're talking about funded pensions that need to be invested in the market. So we should remove the real barriers, taxation differences, excessive withholding tax procedures, incompatible insolvency rules. These are what actually prevent pension funds from investing efficiently across borders today. But at the same time, we should be very careful not to overreach, and that also includes overreaching in the ambition in supervisory convergence in pensions, because pension systems are national. They are embedded in labor law and social systems. So subsidiarity is not just a principle, it's a practical necessity. And also because the pensions landscape is very diverse, we have very different actors of very different sizes. The pension funds play a very different role across Europe. So proportionality in European approach is critical, especially in the Central Eastern European region, where systems are still developing. Regulatory complexity can easily become a barrier to growth. There is also a risk that the current debate that we are increasing regulatory burden, for example, the pending European Pension Fund Directive, what's called IRB 2, it can actually increase regulatory burdens and reduce the attractiveness of funded pensions rather than strengthen them. So pension funds should be concerned much more about the investment risks and longevity risks. Will there be enough money to pay for pensions than about regulatory risks? So we should not move in that direction where we have seen much of the financial market regulation going in insurance, in mutual funds. There's too much regulation, too much complexity. We should not do the same for pension funds. So the balance, in my view, is clear. We need to integrate the markets. We need to remove barriers, but not over-regulate or centralize pension systems.
Thank you very much, Matti, for your perspective. Perhaps I can now turn to Sebastian. So a number of analyses, including from Better Finance, have pointed to a structural issue in Europe. While households hold high levels of savings, they're often not channeled into capital markets. And when they are, the outcomes are not always optimal. We also see persistent concerns around low real returns, high or unclear costs, and difficulties for investors in understanding and comparing products. At the same time, we see that many savers remain in low-yield deposits, which raises broader questions about both participation and performance. So against this backdrop, would you say that Europe is primarily facing a problem of pension adequacy, or rather a problem of investment performance and product outcomes? Or in other words, where is the system currently falling short for citizens?
Thank you, Andrea. So pensions adequacy or investment performance? Well, I would say both, really, because whatever way you approach a problem, one follows the other. I mean, if investment performance is generally too low in an economy, then economic growth is sluggish, then it becomes harder for the economy to set aside a part of its output to support that segment of the population that is not able to produce economic value anymore, so the elderly. So the pay-as-you-go systems, as Roger said, are under duress, in large part because of the aging of the European populations, but also in part due to the political choices that have been made over the past decades to focus on competitiveness, on the reduction of labor costs, which translated into pressures to reduce social contributions and structural mass employment. The result of those policies for pay-as-you-go public pensions is inevitable, and that's chronic underfunding. That's not the topic of this discussion. I will stop there. My point is, where do we go from there? Where do we go from this situation that we have inherited? Well, the political choice that has been made is to have current workers save for their own retirement income. That is a choice, can be criticized, but this is beyond this discussion. The point is, we have made the collective choice of relying on capital accumulation to cater for future performance pensioners' needs. And we have, in most advanced economies, chosen to rely on private financial companies to manage that capital accumulation. Again, a potentially valid choice, although we must bear in mind that the working age population now has a triple burden on its shoulders. One, workers must pay for social contributions to keep paying for the public pensions of the previous generations that were not told to save for their old age, a lack of financial literacy in the past decades. Two, they must save a significant part of their wages to constitute their own retirement capital on top of what they already pay for the others. And they must do that, plus affording ever increasing housing prices. They pay for education and health services that used to be public and affordable, eat organic food, go to the gym to remain healthy, whatever you might think of, on a salary that should not increase too much because firms must be competitive. And the only accepted measure of competitiveness in our day and age is return on equity for shareholders. So I don't know about the others, but personally, as both a midlife worker and pension saver, I find it a bit stressful. So from that somewhat uncomfortable standpoint, the financial performance of retirement savings is indeed a very important topic, because there is no way on earth an individual with the median salary can save enough of their monthly income during their whole working life to ensure that they'll get a decent retirement income, unless those savings gain real purchasing powers over the years. That is why investment performance matters for pension adequacy, and that's why we keep repeating and repeating, probably damning Matty's ears with that we should focus on cost and performance. And we have made that the collective choice to rely on private long-term investment schemes to provide retirement income for future generations. Now we must make sure they effectively manage to generate sufficient returns on contributions to offset the decrease in public pensions. On that score, I would say that the track record of supplementary pensions generally is far from great, I'm sorry to say. Nominal returns on supplementary pensions are in too many cases too low to offset the long-term effect of cost and inflation. So the median nominal return after 10 years of all the product categories we analyze in our report that you mentioned is 4.41% per year. That's fine, okay, good return. But once you account for fees and inflation, the median falls to just 0.3% per year. That's a median performance. If we focus just on occupational pensions, the return is 0.46%, but personal pensions are minus 0.36%. So people are actually losing money, and again, median performance. So are we facing a problem of product outcomes? Hell yes. And the system is currently falling short for citizens by telling them that the solution to demographic change is to tighten their belt and contribute to products that we are supposed to trust, despite all evidence, to provide a substantial replacement for falling public pensions. So it's not my place to say what design is the best for a pension system overall. Whether and how much we must rely on supplement pensions in any way form. What I'll say is that whenever we decide to rely on market solutions for the provision of retirement benefits, then we must look carefully at whether said market solutions are fit for purpose, for the social purpose we assign them, and at the moment, many are not, especially in the realm of personal pension. I mean, the average yearly cost of occupational pensions from 2000 to 2025 has been 0.4% of assets per year. Cumulated over 25 years, that's roughly 10% of your savings. The average yearly cost of personal pensions, within our study at least, has been 1.5% over the same period. If you accumulate that over 25 years, that's 43% of your savings that go away into fees for financial performance that is not superior. So, of course, running a personal pension scheme is necessarily more costly. You have to have a distribution system, provide financial advice on a scale that is nowhere near comparable to what occupational pension schemes have to provide. So that is to say that we cannot expect personal pensions to become as cost efficient as occupational pensions. That would be unrealistic. Still, in our view at Better Finance, there is room to improve the average level of cost efficiency in this third pillar of pension system. Now, I can't claim to have Matt's or Roger's long years of expertise in the field, especially in practical expertise with those schemes, but I tend to think that this is a very important fact to bear in mind when advising someone about where to put their life savings, especially if your client is counting on it to make a difference for their retirement income.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for the insightful remarks and for the clear messages. Finally, I would like to now turn to Jana. So Jana, a question for you. In one of your publications in response to the consultation on the Savings and Investment Union, Impact Europe noted that despite the promising shift towards impact investing, pension fund investments in impact remain limited across Europe. And this is despite the fact that sustainability, impact investing, and long-term investments are top priorities and values for its beneficiaries. So from your perspective, what concrete steps can be taken to remove existing barriers and to better enable pension funds to allocate capital to impact investing, while at the same time respecting fiduciary duty and ensuring robust risk management?
Thank you very much, Andrea, also for your patience. I'm so very happy to see you all. Let me start maybe briefly by clarifying what we mean by impact investing and why it matters in this discussion. Impact investing refers to investments that really intentionally generate measurable social and environmental impact alongside financial returns, and that range from capital preservation to really market rate returns. It's characterized by three core elements: intentionality, as mentioned, impact measurement and management, and additionality or investor contribution. In practice, this means really financing innovative real economy solutions across areas such as affordable energy transition, housing, healthcare, education, but also increasingly more and more AI, deep technology, clean technology, designed from the outset to create positive societal value. And it really includes supporting vulnerable populations as well, and improving employment pathways, addressing long-term structural challenges. So That's very important to say, that it does differentiate to sustainable investing or transition finance, as we know, under the EU Sustainable Finance Initiative. Also, very importantly, impact investing is no longer niche. The European private impact market, as estimated by our recent report published last year, manages around 190 billions, and that's only private markets data. When we include public markets, which is estimated by Global Impact Investing Network, GIN. In other words, it places across 800 billions in assets under management. So we are clearly looking, as you mentioned at the beginning, at a fast-growing, increasingly relevant market. And as you also stressed, from the regulatory perspective, there are continuous barriers still limiting pension fund participation, and I'll guide through some of them. But importantly, the EU Sustainable Finance Framework is also part of the equation. While it's very essential, it was not initially designed with impact investing fully in mind. The priority was, rightly so at the time, to establish a common language, to harmonize definition of what sustainable economic activity means. But as a result, impact as a distinct investment strategy has not really been captured, and it complicated the situation of impact fund managers and financial intermediaries to raise awareness within the European market in terms of what impact investing is, what it entails, what kind of data should be expected by the LPs and so on. It complicates the phase of educating the market on this emerging stream. Secondly, pension funds also face a very risk-averse culture linked to fiduciary duties, and that combined with the lack of comparable data with emerging, evolving market, it's very difficult in practice to integrate impact into the mainstream allocation decisions at the moment. So what concrete steps the regulation can actually take? First is really to look at the IORP 2 directive to modernize the provision so that it explicitly allow pension funds to consider not only financial returns but beneficiaries' preferences for positive social and environmental impact, but while, of course, respecting fiduciary duties, the pension adequacy. It's very important. It's important to have products that generate financial returns. Second, the recognition and integration of impact investing under the SFDR would significantly improve awareness, and we are on a very good way in this aspect, because the European Commission did integrate in the latest proposal the lenses on impact investments. So we are hoping that throughout the political negotiations, what the Commission has proposed will be in the final text as well. This would be very helpful. Third, we need to really look at enabling and scaling blended finance mechanisms. We need really the public capital to work in a de-risking space at both European and national levels to help de-risk investments, crowd in more capital alongside pension capital, but not only, and make really impact opportunities compatible with the risk returns requirements that the pension funds need. For that, some adaptations of state aid rules will probably need to take place as well, and also some relaxations on constraints for philanthropy to come in and join the de-risking phase at the national levels. In many European jurisdictions, they are not allowed to do so, and philanthropic capital is also very well equipped to support the public capital in de-risking such investments. And of course, we need to continue to deepen European capital markets. We need to work seriously on enabling access to markets. The initiative, like the 28 regime, the EU Inc. is really very promising, and we are hoping that there will be sufficient political will to go deeper into the integration of our capital markets. And lastly, I really want us to look at the French model of the solidarity funds. It's a fantastic model that allows citizens or beneficiaries to choose a portion of their allocations to be allocated for societal impact, portion up to 10%, between 5 and 10%. So it doesn't really alter the financial performance of the product, and it also reflects the level of readiness on the market on how many solutions effectively there are in place that can be financed at the moment with such a large capital. And I would say I stop here for the moment and we'll continue with further aspects later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jana, and thank you to everyone for your very insightful reflections. So what clearly emerges here is from what we have seen, a set of fundamental tensions between integration and diversity, between economic objectives and social outcomes, and system design and individual experience. But these tensions do not play out uniformly across Europe, and they are most often visible in member states where pension systems and capital markets are still evolving. So for the second session, I would now like to turn to Central and Eastern Europe to ground this discussion more concretely. So while we often refer to a common European three-pillar model, systems in CE countries differ significantly, from centrally organized funded schemes, also called Pillar 1Bs, to emerging auto-enrollment models and more limited occupational pensions. So this means that countries start from very different positions in the context of the Savings and Investment Union, often alongside less developed capital markets and lower financial literacy. So the key question here is how to advance integration in a way that reflects these different starting points and also remains inclusive of diverse national models. So Sebastian, perhaps I can turn to you first. So while participation in funded systems has increased in parts of the CE region, concerns still remain around performance, costs, and real returns. So in this context, do you see these systems as delivering satisfactory outcomes for savers? And what lessons should policymakers take from the CE experience when designing the Savings and Investment Union?
Thank you, Andrea. So in our report on cost and performance of pensions, we collect data about 7 CE countries, so the 3 Baltic countries, Poland, Slovakia, Romania, and Croatia. I would not say that we can derive from that conclusions about the whole region. As you said, there is a lot of diversity. So just bear that caveat in mind from what I'm about to say. And in those 7 countries, we analyzed 14 categories of products. I would say that with the exception of Poland, these countries have rather similar pension system. It's a classic 3-pillar system with public pensions, mandatory pensions, which are not always occupational, they are mandatory, and additional voluntary pension funds. Polish landscape is a bit different with more variety, especially in the 3rd pillar, different types of long-term and retirement savings products, and no mandatory pension savings. So in terms of returns across those countries and categories, we see nominal gross returns that are roughly in line with those of Western Europe. I mean, the median return over 10 years stands at 4.9%. As I said earlier, the average across Europe is 4.41%. So we are in the same waters. Before cost and inflation, for both mandatory and voluntary pension savings. But once we discount costs and inflation, that falls to just 0.2% per year in mandatory pension funds and minus 0.7% for voluntary pensions. I tell we find there the same effect of the higher cost of voluntary pensions that explains the difference between the two, which depresses the performance of those products. And there is a macroeconomic trend of generally higher inflation in CE countries. I mean, the case that really stands out is Romania, with quite higher inflation that really eats away a large part of performance compared to the rest of Europe. So to your question, I'd say that these products generally fail savers in roughly the same proportion as those of the rest of Europe. No, not especially more or less. I mean, the only exception in terms of performance is really Sweden. That's bright and shiny. What is interesting is that many of those countries have experimented with automatic enrollment. They made contributing to pension funds mandatory, and several of them later introduced the possibility to opt out and get part or all of your savings back. And when they did that, a very large proportion of pension savers actually withdrew their money from the mandatory pension schemes in very massive proportions. I have two examples in mind, one in Estonia a few years back, and the other more recently in Romania. In both cases, more than a third of people got their money out. So I don't rightly know what that tells us about the pension funds themselves or the pension system, but it tells us that there is a large segment of the population that could imagine a better or more urgent use for that money than pension savings. I would not insult them by saying this is short-sightedness or lack of financial literacy. It might also be that public pensions is not the only part of the social state that is falling apart in Central and Eastern Europe, and people are forced to choose between several priorities, some of which, like say, getting a roof over your head or paying for your children's education, might be seen as even more pressing than retirement, and wages are just too low to cover for all of it. So again, not a specific problem for pension fund managers or pension system, but more a broader macroeconomic issue. Another interesting point is that it is in CE countries that we can find the PEP, the Pan-European Personal Pension Product, on the market, and there is demand for it there. So by contrast with voluntary pension funds, there the PEP offers low costs, diversified investments, and a life cycle investment strategy that promised at the moment, them a better balance between risk and performance in the long term. For the sake of clarity, I'll just mention that the life cycle investment strategy is a long-term approach where your contributions are invested in higher risk, higher yield assets, like equity during your accumulation phase, most of your working years. Then your exposure is progressively switched to fixed income securities like bonds to stabilize the value of your capital when you reach retirement. So you have a glide path that is based on your age and remaining years to retirement. It is used to determine your exposure to different asset classes in a way that is intended to maximize returns during the accumulation phase and safety in retirement. And that's something that we don't see a lot in the mainstream pension funds across Europe generally, and especially across Eastern Europe. So I don't know whether the PEP is a failure at the European level generally. That's what that's the talk of the town here in Brussels. And honestly, I don't really care. What I see is that there is a demand for long-term investment products that promises higher returns, a good degree of safety, and all of that for limited costs. So do with that what you may, really.
That's very helpful, Sebastian. Thank you. Let me now turn to Jana. So Jana, CE countries represent both a growing source of long-term savings and a region with significant investment needs, particularly in areas such as infrastructure, social investment, and green transition, among others. So what role can the Savings and Investment Union play in better connecting these savings to productive and impactful investment opportunities within the region? And what are the main barriers that would still need to be addressed?
Thank you very much for this question. I'm going to be building up on what Sebastian mentioned, because given that the CE region in particular is underdeveloped in the topic that we have today, it's also a very big opportunity to work and to leverage the Savings and Investment Union plans in a different way than in a Western part of Europe, because we are probably going to be looking at building something from the bottom, something that is not there yet for the second and third pillar pensions in many countries, rather than readjusting a very well designed and traditional and well put in place system, which is harder than to transform than building something new. Saving and Investment Union has really a critical role to play in connecting European savings to productive and impactful investment opportunities, which is exactly what is needed in the CEE region in particular. And I also want to just stress that it's not only the regulatory requirements and adjustment that we need to address here, it's also just a broader point in recognition and better recognition of long-term societal risk as financially material. Of course, demographic change, youth preparedness, the impact of AI on employment, aging, and related healthcare and other needs are strong social challenges that are going to be posing systemic financial risk for long-term investors. So this is something that we need to figure out how to address in a right way. So for the Central and Eastern Europe, I would say that this is an opportunity to build and deepen the system in a different way, the way that would channel those investments into more productive way and to finance real economy and real development. And I would just go back to say that this is exactly what we see, that there is a demand on the beneficiaries, demand on the citizen side to allow them to put the money for a good use. And just a funny information, an important point, that the biggest climate and societal impact one individual can have is not through their lifestyle choices alone, but really through their capital. We see that where we invest our money, it really does matter. And in fact, up to 85% of individuals' carbon footprint can be linked to where their savings and pensions are invested, according to the data that we have. So this is very important. And I will also look at, again, the French example of the Solidarity Fund, because that could be very well integrated within the CEE region. From some of the information that I can share, these funds have been highly successful, mobilizing over 30 billions in assets, engaging millions of employees. And it is really just to give them the choice for the second and third pillar streams to choose to allocate a portion, small portion of their allocations, 5 to 10% of the assets, to impactful projects, impactful companies, social enterprises, and social economy, while the rest remains to be placed in the traditional and liquid investments. So it would create a balanced approach so that investors can combine impact with appropriate risk and liquidity, because as Sebastian mentioned, we need to have a sufficient returns, right, in those allocations and investments. So the need and call to redirect investments to productive investments and to impact, it's not to really at the cost of the final returns. And financial literacy, also very important point, and also great opportunity, I think, within the CEE region. And I would also take this opportunity to mention that we just yesterday launched a new academy program by taking over the former EFICO, and we are providing more advanced catalog of the training courses for catalytic deal structuring, theory of change, impact measurement, impact finance, loans for induction phase, but also the growth stage. So I think the financial education is going to be needing our attention more and more, not just to shift the burden to end investors, to beneficiaries and citizens, but also the whole chains, whole supply chain in finance needs to continuously improve their financial literacy. Yes.
Thank you very much, Jana, for your perspective. Now turning to Matti. So Matti, given this diversity, ranging from Pillar 1 systems to auto-enrollment models and more traditional voluntary schemes, how, in your opinion, how should EU-level initiatives under the Savings and Investment Union engage with these different starting points?
Thank you, Andrea. I just want to reflect a bit on what has been said this far. I mean, the aging of the population to increasing pressure on public finances and and the inability to pay with less active workers for the increasing number of retirees, that's a real big problem. So the old age dependency ratio, and especially in Central Eastern European countries, that is even higher than in many Western European countries. So the three-pillar structure is really important, as emphasized, and the first pillar, social security, based on sharing the active workers' income with the retirees, is no longer sustainable or no longer adequate as it has been. So it's really important. And then what Sebastian was talking about, the fact that the funded part, which is increasingly important, whether it's the second pillar, occupational or workplace, or third pillar, voluntary savings, that's really important, that these are cost-effective systems, and that they are real returns for the people. And when Sebastian mentioned the Swedish system as a good example, I would agree. If you look at Sweden, they have great system with all the parts are well managed. The first pillar, social security, with the buffer funds, which have really low costs, much lower, like almost 50% lower than the comparable funds in other parts of Europe or in the world as well. They have great occupational pensions. They have great voluntary savings. They have a part of the social security, a personal part, which is in a fund called AP7, which is often highlighted by Better Finance, and it truly is great investment returns. But the AP7 is a luxury part in a luxury system with the leverage up to 150% leverage equity portfolio, which is not possible for pension funds who have liabilities in occupational pensions. That would be totally unfeasible and illegal everywhere. So Sweden is great, and people can learn from Sweden, but it's not doable in most countries. What's in the CEC region, I think, is really important when we look at the experience, is the fact that pension systems are built on trust, and trust depends on stability. And we have different systems in the region, mandatory, auto-enrollment, voluntary, and that reflects, the diversity reflects different national choices. And in my view, the Savings and Investment Union should not try to harmonize this, and it should support it. But what we can learn from the CEC region is very concrete. If you look at Polish system, they had great, very big change in the system with the policy reversal, nationalizing half the pension assets some years ago. And they introduced the employee capital plans, PPK system, which I think is a very good example that you can rebuild trust through consistent design, auto-enrollment, employer contributions, and clear governance. So I think PPK is a success. Lithuania also had a great success with the auto-enrollment system in second pillar that they introduced a few years ago, and they had 80% people covered in the system. Now the present government elected a while ago is dismantling the system, ending auto-enrollment, getting people the opportunity to take out the assets. So that's not really helpful for the long term. Estonia did a similar reform, or even worse, some years ago, and with the experience of that should have stopped Lithuania, but it didn't. So Hungary, of course, they had a nationalization in early 2010 and 11, and that really shows how quickly you can destroy long-term savings and pension savings with political decisions. So the lessons are not theoretical, they are very practical. If you want long-term investments, you need stable, predictable pension policy. You cannot mobilize long-term capital without long-term savers. And the Savings and Investment Union can and has to be crucial in this. And of course, these decisions to dismantle and change systems, they are political decisions that are the member states' competence. The member states decide on this. But what is important in the Savings and Investment Union is also not just the legislative part, but also the non-legislative part, which includes recommendations to member states and to the Union to use the existing policy tools, country-specific recommendations, to support better pensions and better pension savings, I hope, as well. The country-specific recommendations, in my experience, have been very effective in the social security pensions, and I think they can be used also in the funded part, in the occupational pensions. So I think for the SIU, the main thing is to support the development of funded systems and then ensure that they can invest effectively across borders, and that you avoid policy or regulatory actions that undermine trust. Trust is the key. Regardless of the system, if people don't trust it, it will not be sustainable in the long term.
Okay, thank you very much, Matti. Finally, turning to Roger, focusing on the financial literacy. So how would this affect the role of financial literacy and advice? And in this respect, how can we ensure that individuals remain sufficiently informed and engaged, particularly as they approach retirement and they face more complex decisions?
Now, as I said, financial literacy is the alpha bringing to omega. There is nothing without financial literacy. We have to be obsessed by financial literacy every day and every night. That's really my clear message. What I like in the discussions we had on Central and Eastern Europe, you know, I'm basically a banker, a financial advisor, 43 years of experience. And when people begin to calculate, when I began to work, there was a communist system on the other side of the wall. And I know the communist system quite well. What I really look at this region as an amazing laboratorium, and I know from where this region comes from, because I made a minor in Marxism-Leninism, so I know the thing quite well. And seeing how it basically moved to where it is today, I think it's again very interesting. And the fact to go into this three-pillar system, even though we had the 2008 crisis, which created a lot of stress, not only in Central Europe, but in the whole globe. But the direction is the good one. What I think are, let's try to put where we should have improvement. And I would go through a certain number of points. It was mentioned in the discussion, and I didn't know that at all in the discussion, that it's very easy to take out money from Pillar 2 and Pillar 3. That's totally unacceptable. This has to be totally cut, because the system will not work if you just, oh, I want my money back. No. I mean, in a normal system, you could probably take money back. In Switzerland, to take the Swiss example, you can take it out when you create your own company. You stop to be an employee, but you begin to be an entrepreneur. That's a very good reason. The second one, that you are moving to Thailand, so you move completely out of the so-called European economic area, which is another good reason. But all the other reasons are bad. So it's very important. That's the first thing I would like to mention. Second is in this Pillar 2 and Pillar 3, mainly Pillar 2, a word was not mentioned so far is governance. We need a very good governance, because this is employer-employee trust. So you meet in this governance, in the boards of these company pension funds. We need representative of the employer, and we need representatives from the employee. It's very important. So we can challenge, we can discuss performance, we can discuss what doesn't work right. We can discuss if you want to go more in sustainable investment. All this is very important. But how to do it if you have no financial literacy? How do you want to have a board meeting with an employee who doesn't know how these things work? That again, we always fall down to the same issue of financial literacy. That's the second point I wanted to mention. And the third one, that we have also not discussed so far, on top of governance, is the tax incentives. Nothing works without tax incentives. I'm now talking Pillar 2 and Pillar 3. I see, and I'm still amazed to see, I'm talking now more specifically in Pillar 3. The limits for one person in Luxembourg Pillar 3 per annum was at 3,200 euros a year. Now they change it because they realize it's a crazy number. So they realize a crazy number. They put it at 4,500. I take now a Swiss number converted in euro. It's 7,800. But again, these figures are far too low. You know, in my own world, and this will be my conclusion word because time flies. I'm now today, and I'm retired. So I'm the only one on this panel to say I am retired for already quite some years. So being retired, what do I say? We always say supplementary pension. No, it's not the right word. My main pension is the second pillar. Pillar 2 is the most important. The pillar 1 is the one coming after. And the pillar 3 will just follow the pillar 1, because it has to be like that, because we are again in a moment of deep transition with this huge number of baby boomers coming to retirement. This is something which never happened so far, and it will not happen again. And that's where Jana will like what I say. There's a huge parallelism on the pension crisis we have today, which will create an army of very poor, miserably poor Europeans because of a lack of financial literacy, because of bad systems. There is a parallel with sustainability, because we have the same with climate change, with climate transformation. We are also running against a wall, and the wall is in 2100. And they can tell you for the pension, it will not be 2100. We will begin to have extremely poor people in Europe in 20 years. And that's something we have somewhere to have in mind. It's very late to look at these different things. I'm trying to put as a type of a wake-up call. That's a bit why I came and accepted the invitation to talk. No, as a financial advisor, we have a responsibility to talk to our clients. And what I would probably say at a message to all the EFPA certified financial advisors: yes, talk to your client, but you should also talk to the kids of the client, because it's very seldomly, you cannot be very wealthy at the age of 25. It happens, but it's very rare. It's 1 over 500,000 people. So what is important for the financial advisor? Talk to the kids of the client. Because the famous kid of the client, if he doesn't begin to have pension as a top priority at the age of 25, he will hit the wall too. That's really, these are really my key messages. It's very simple. I'm totally amazed to see what I have around me with still very large European countries with only a pillar 1. Hey, gosh, I begin to be very anxious. And I'm very happy that on my side, I'm on the safe side. But again, it's a question of responsibility. And another thing that I very much in mind is the intergenerational solidarity. Will the young people in 2040, which is basically in 15 years, will they accept to pay such huge pension fees for this army of baby boomers who are retired? I'm not so sure. So we should really act and do something. I think there is a topic of emergency, of urgency. We need to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. And the message is very clear. We also got a question in the meantime that I thought now it would be a good time to ask it. So the question is, what is your opinion about the proposed amendments to the PEP regulation aimed at including Pillar 1Bs in the scope? I don't know if who would have any response to this question.
I know about amendments to the PEP regulation to allow use of PEP on the workplace, so Pillar 2, but I don't know about any use of PEP in Pillar 1bis. I think I don't know about the others, but I have not seen that. I can comment on the possibility to use it as a workplace savings vehicle. I think that where you already have well-developed offers of occupational pensions, that will probably not fly. But where occupational pensions are currently underdeveloped, and that's especially with SMEs if you don't have sectoral plans, or maybe some large firms that would, could find a standard pan-European solution easier to manage than national occupational schemes, could find it useful. In any case, I would say that that will remain something of a default option if there is no better, more tailored option in the national context.
If I may, Andrea, I think Sebastian was, of course, was very correct in what you said about the PEP part. I think perhaps the question was about the other pending legislative proposal in the European Commission's pension package. So PEP is one, the other one is the European Pension Fund Directive, IORP2, and there is a proposal to extend the IORP2 also to the possibility to extend the scope of the IORP2 directive to first pillar BIS, which is by definition social security schemes managed by private companies, especially prevalent in many Central Eastern European countries. And that is, of course, a very big political question, because the IORP2 is about occupational workplace pension institutions, and it's an internal market legal basis and very different from what is social security. So how feasible would it be for the member states to put parts of their social security system in this legal framework, which is about internal market, not about social security? So I think it's a very big political issue, and it's been debated in the European Council and will be soon debated in the European Parliament as well.
Okay. Thank you, Matti, for clarifying this. Then, if I can amend my response, I think there is diversity in all of the pillars of pension systems across Europe, and that's probably a good thing. So if there is any extension of the scope of the IORP directive beyond pure occupational pension schemes, it has to be partial, and each member state will have to define what element of the IORP framework needs to be or can be extended to what other scheme, either in the occupational, in the personal, or in the public scheme. And I think that really needs to be decided at the national level.
Okay. Thank you very much. So this would wrap up the second session of our discussion today. I will now turn to the next steps. So far, much of our discussion has focused on diagnosing key challenges, from market fragmentation and participation to investment outcomes, and the diversity of pension systems across Europe. So the Savings and Investment Union offers the real opportunity to address these issues, but its success will depend on how effectively it is translated into concrete actions. So the key questions here would be: what should be prioritized, where are the main gaps, and how do we ensure that the framework delivers tangible improvements for both markets and citizens? So I will start with Jana. So here my question to you is, as the Savings and Investment Union evolves, how can policymakers ensure that the mobilization of capital is not only efficient, but also aligned with broader societal objectives such as sustainability, inclusion, and long-term resilience? And what would be the key enabler to unlock impact investment at scale in Europe?
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this question. I have a very important term here. For me, a central enabler is really blended finance. The strategic use of public capital and potentially also philanthropic capital to de-risk impact investments, to unlock those opportunities opportunities for scale, to crowd in larger institutional private investors. This is very important and a little underdeveloped, but Europe has been very creative in that. And I have a few examples. Just I want to also explain what is blended finance, what do I mean, and according to organization called Blended Finance Collective based in London, it's a mechanism that brings together concessional and non-concessional capital to bridge the gap between the mainstream investors and those impact-driven enterprises, and to really address the question of scaling impactful and addressing societal challenges. There is a program called Invest EU under the European long-term budget that has worked very, very well. It has played a catalytic role, and the European Commission is increasingly looking to structure and to add to the toolbox for these instruments also a specific blended financial instrument. So far, it worked with providing guarantees on the debt side, co-investments on the equity side, and technical support, capacity building support. So institutions like European Investment Fund and the European Investment Bank really have helped through working through the catalytic way with the European long-term budget to scale up those markets and attract first-time investors, make those innovative smaller investments viable. And I would say just the next phase would be to apply this logic more at the national and regional level as well, to take what's working so well at the European level, and in the next long-term budget, which is coming into place from 2028, and it will empower the member states' flexibility and capacity to work with the European budget in a more structural way. They can also learn how to work with financial intermediaries, how to create instruments in a way that crowds in further private capital rather than them working with the public budget and trying to. Public budget is shrinking, and we need to work on increasing the collaborations, co-investments between the public and private more and more in the coming years. And there are great examples on both sides, including on the CEE. There is an example of the Slovak Investment Holding, which is a government-owned institution that worked with the European Social Fund in a way that really channeled the investment to de-risk investment to social housing, together with Erste Group, which is a social finance, social bank group. On the western side, we have a very interesting example of the Social Impact Fund in Spain, which is managed by Cofidis, and really worked out to create a public fund that can support the financial intermediaries, co-invest through to them, and then they can then crowd in the further private investments. And these tools really are just to help de-risk the investments, make it more mainstream, make it more known, come in with their present to give the greater confidence and stability, and we see that it's working very well. On the philanthropic side, what will probably need to happen is to create that regulatory environment that enables them to participate. In many jurisdictions, they are not allowed to provide such guarantees. Also, the regulatory constraints remain in a financial regulation, so that such a blending financial instruments and vehicles can function legally, can be set up, and can be then operating across border. I will stop here, but I would look at the power of the public capital as well in this space.
Thank you, Jana. Now, moving on to Sebastian. My question for you here would be, what would success look like in practice for retail investors? And what is the one change you believe that would make the most immediate difference in improving outcomes?
Thank you, Jana. Allow me to start with a small sidestep and my traditional response to Matthij's traditional remark on my no less traditional mention of Sweden. Yes, AP7 so far is a specific case and probably taking too much risk, and it probably cannot be reproduced anywhere else. Still, there is a chasm between its performance and that of the rest of Europe, so targeting some middle ground should be possible. I'll stop there. Now, to your question, generally speaking, and when it comes to supplementary pensions, I'd say success for retail investors would be reaching levels of payouts in retirement altogether that effectively provide for a replacement rate in the area of 70% of the last salary. That's the end goal, and that's what is generally taken as a measure of adequate pension. So I say in the area because how much retirement income you need to maintain your lifestyle and retirement depends on many other factors, including what public services are effectively available for free or nearly free for the elderly in your country. And then Sweden is also another paradox because that's probably one of the countries where you have the best returns on your pension savings, yet the less need of it. Now, that implies a different challenge for each national supplementary pension sector. So where the replacement rate is currently high, but public pensions are set to decline, which is the case across Western and Northern Europe at least, then supplementary pensions must be able to generate sufficient returns, sufficient wealth to offset this decline. And now in Central and Eastern Europe countries, where the replacement rates are currently generally lower, supplementary pensions should generate even more returns to not only offset the potential decline in public pensions, but also increase retirement income to ensure that future pensioners have adequate pensions. An even more important challenge, in my view, is to offer people with low income a way to effectively build up some pension savings. When all that's left of your salary at the end of the month is 20 euros, you cannot save for your pension. And you're very likely to oppose any reform that forces you to lock a substantial part of your salary into a pension scheme, especially if the returns of that scheme are less than stellar. Now, what is one change I see would make a difference in outcomes? I don't think I can answer that question. I mean, we're talking about a system that requires people with no money to invest in products they can't afford and destroys the purchasing power of whatever little savings they manage to scrap. So where do we start? First, make sure people have decent earnings so that they have something to save, for starters, again, beyond this discussion. Then to give them access to pension schemes that effectively increase the real value of their savings and are able to provide for substantial supplementary retirement income. And three, ensure that schemes that are not able to do that are out of the market. So tax incentives, and there I echo what Roger said in the previous discussion, I think they are an important part of the picture. They can play an important role in getting people to start investing. But I tend to think that someone who can afford to save 3,000 euros a year for the pension can afford to pay taxes. Tax incentives have an important cost. They add a burden on public finances that is in fine borne by the community. So be very careful with how you design them so that they really target the people who need a nudge and a support to start investing for the pension, not those who already have this possibility. And I'll add a final remark. I echo what Jana said on the need to integrate impact investing into the mainstream pension saving mindset. And I go further. In my view, considering all the challenges and threats that are posed by climate change, biodiversity loss, and other world-changing trends, we cannot expect traditional impact-agnostic investment to offer positive returns over the long term. There will be a fall in that. We are entering an age of global instability that makes your traditional financial forecasting increasingly unreliable. So integrating the impact of investments into the investment decisions of mainstream pension funds is a necessity. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Now, Roger, we have discussed the importance of financial literacy, advice, and trust in enabling participation. Looking ahead, what do you see as the most effective way to bridge the gap between policy ambition and actual investor behavior? And how can we ensure that individuals are not only included in the system, but they're also able to navigate it with confidence?
Yeah, exactly. And confidence needs financial literacy. Again, it's It's quite an easy book because you have a first chapter, which is so big that the other chapters are much smaller, and because everything is derived from financial literacy. Let me just come perhaps back to some points which are very, very important to me. I would say we have to fight a certain number of parameters in the European society at large. The first thing to fight is inertia, because I see a lot of people who make the ostrich, they put their head in the sand. They are in a country where we have only a pillar 1. They have no pillar 2 because it doesn't exist. The pillar 3, they ignored so far that it exists. And they go right to the wall, creating the new poor of the middle of this century. Inertia, we have to fight inertia. We have also to fight this loss aversion. It's a big difference between the United States, Northern America, and Europe. This type of aversion, I do not want to lose. And here we go again to financial literacy. When you look at the capital markets, we have capital markets over 40 years. When you are an investor from the age of 25 to the age of 65, you don't care about the financial crisis because we have 40 years in front of you and everything is somewhat ironed out. What we need to fight this loss aversion. And after we have, everybody has type of natural biases they don't like, it's not the moment, I have other priorities. We have also to fight all this in order to create trust. Trust, again, is a key word that we need to have in mind. The second point I would like to put in place is transparency for the future retiree. And this transparency is completely missing. For me, in an ideal environment, a European citizen should have an annual view every year. What is in my pocket with the first pillar, what is in the second pillar, and what is in the third pillar. And for this, he needs to be documented. And if he's a little bit smart, he will say what I said, the pillar, most important pillar is the pillar 2, and not the pillar 1, certainly not, and not the pillar 3. Why not the pillar 1? Because it's totally unpredictable. Revolutions can happen in this demographic bomb we have in front of us. So pillar 2 is essential. You try to mimic your pillar 1 and your pillar 3, you can calculate on yourself. The financial advisor, because I'm representing the financial advisors, they play a very important role on the pillar 3. Because this is totally, you do it on your own way. It's something which is not compulsory. It's we have the freedom to do it, so you can choose the way you invest, conservative, medium, balanced, more aggressive with equity. And for this, you need the famous financial advisor. I think the financial literacy brings you at a certain level, but it doesn't bring you to the real top. So transparency is key. The number 3, I come back to that one. And I'm insisting on that one. It's tax incentives. I'm very much, look, I have an NGO in Congo, in Kinshasa. Do you think that I would collect 1 single euro, if it's not fully tax deductible? I would take 0. My NGO can close door right away. Tax incentive is completely key. Nobody will save in a pillar 3 if there is no tax incentive. I say it loudly, sounds something perhaps a little bit aggressive, but that's the way it is. People do not like to pay taxes. They pay taxes because they have to. I also know nobody who says, I love to pay taxes if people do not exist. So we have to find ways to be sure that we attract people. And very, very last point, because I think we have to think about the pillar 4. So what is a pillar 4? I just explained very shortly what the pillar 4 would be. We are in front of a bomb, and the bomb will have very poor people in front of us. What is the pillar 4? I just take an example. We have a Senegalese coming to Luxembourg at the age of 40. There is no pension system at all in Senegal. He comes to Luxembourg. He likes Luxembourg. He begins to take the nationality. He's here. He's 40. So he will pay his pension for 25 years. Nobody told him about the pillar 3, and there is no pillar 2. These poor Senegalese, he will be Luxembourgish, he will be 65, he will be the best ideal example of the new poor who has somewhere to be supported if you want to avoid him to sleep below a bridge in the cold weather of Europe. And that's what I want to say. It's a bit brutal, perhaps, but again, my message is very much wake-up call. And as financial advisors, we have the mission to tell our clients and the kids of our clients how important it is.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So now I would like to end the session, this discussion with Matti. So Matti, if you were to identify the single most important priority to ensure that the Savings and Investment Union effectively supports pension systems and long-term investment, what would it be?
I think it's clear that from my point of view, you need to put the funded pensions at the center of the SIU, and you need to do it effectively. I mean, reflecting on what Roger said about the need to know in the SIU package on pensions, there are proposals on developing what's called pension dashboards, where on a macro level, member states would then have a view of what does their pension system look like, how sustainable and adequate it is. And I think it's really important to have this assessment, and also these what's called pension tracking systems, where then individuals can and ideally can see all of their pensions, first pillar, second and third pillar. Some countries have these, many don't, but that's part of the SIU plan. So fully supportive of this, but pensions need to be the focus in this. There is very much political pressure in the SIU to use pension assets and pension funds as source of capital for growth in Europe. Growth in Europe is important, employment is important. The real economy is the basis for all pensions, whether it's first pillar, a second or third pillar. But it is important that the fiduciary duty of the pension fund is respected, that fiduciary duty is not negotiable, that the role of the pension funds is to provide for retirement income and not to serve other political purposes, even when they are very good ones, whether it's sustainability or defense or growth. Pension funds need to have the fiduciary duty in the center of their thinking and the actions, and that should not be undermined by the Savings and Investment Union policies. So when pension funds are seen, or pension systems are seen as political tools, then trust declines, and then participation in one way or the other follows, and you can then dismantle even the strongest systems if you do that. So the priority is clear to me: grow funded pensions, protect fiduciary principles, and create the right investment environment for the Savings and Investment Union.
Thank you very much to all of you for your remarks. That concludes the third session. So now we will move on to the Q&A session. So we already received a few questions in the chat, so I will try to, I will rephrase them a bit and address them to you. So one of the question is, do you think that the current framework provides sufficient instruments to address long-term sustainability challenges, or is there a need for stronger coordination?
If I could start, I would say we need a lot more coordination, and not just across Europe, but also between the public and private and philanthropic capital to make it right. I would just stress again the point on the blended finance. It goes back to respecting the fiduciary duty of pension funds. We need to really make efforts to de-risk the investments and to also scale up the opportunities for pension funds to come at a stable phase of the investable projects. So there are a lot that needs to come into together structurally. We don't have that much time, so we need to work quickly. A lot that needs to take place in a greater integration of the European markets, and we need to continue to look at ways that we haven't continued in the past, because we do have challenges that we did not have in the past, and clearly we do not have yet solutions at scale. So certainly greater coordination needs to take place, and collaboration and creativity.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We have also received a broader question on framing. So can funded retirement savings be seen not only as a social necessity, but as an economic opportunity for Europe? And what would need to change to unlock this potential?
I mean, in my understanding, that's what I've been trying to emphasize. That yes, it is a savings and investment union which aims to make Europe again more competitive and sustainable in the global competition with, and the starting points with comparisons with China and the United States. The pension assets and transforming the existing high level of bank deposits, bank savings in bank deposits, which are not deemed in this debate to be as productive as they should be, into more growth assets like private equity, venture capital, also real estate, infrastructure, all of those, and equity investments, so supporting companies. That is the key issue here. If you compare the American situation, they started with funded pensions much earlier. And if you look at the size of their pension assets, it's more than 44 trillion out of the some 70 trillion of global pension assets. So 2/3 of the global pension assets are in the US. And that is really the fundamental basis for the American investment economy and the asset management companies, BlackRock and others. They thrive from this basis, and that's really difficult to replicate. But even though Roger said you have to start early, I would say that with funded pensions and the future of the European economy and the European citizens, it's never too late to start. So we don't give up. We do our best and hope for the better future than doing that, and doing it consistently for the long term, not just for 5 years doing this and for 5 years doing that. Because if you look at the European policies, 10 years ago, they were pushing pension funds to invest in euro-nominated government bonds. Now they're pushing pension funds to invest in private equity and venture capital. So that's not what we need. We need consistent policies which support real good investments with real good returns, because as Sebastian rightly said, that is the key. You have to have real returns, and they have to be good ones.
And if I can add on that one, financial literacy is again the key. US are investing in shares since 150 years. It's less the case in Europe, and how we could fix it is via financial literacy.
Okay. Perhaps one more question, as we receive some remarks on financial literacy, transparency, and advice. And Roger, you have already shared with us plenty of insightful remarks. But yeah, how can we improve engagement and ensure citizens, as you mentioned, they can better understand and navigate pension decisions?
There was a very interesting initiative that is coming out from the European Commission, and I discussed it with our regulator in Luxembourg, CSSF, is the role of the ambassadors. There will be financial literacy ambassadors in each country of the EU. And I think that these ambassadors can play a very important role in their ownership of the issue. They could generate, as we said, at schools, at secondary school, at the age of 12, this is totally compulsory. They could arrange for events for conferences, for e-learning, for a lot of things. So I think this ambassador, I like this concept. In US, we would probably use the word champion, but it's the same as the champion's ambassador, who is like the guy, going to the crusade in front to have a better financial literacy. And I really like this idea, which probably comes out of the pocket of Commissioner Albuquerque, and it's very key, and I consider it as very important.
Okay, Sebastian, would you have some remarks?
I fully share what Roger said about during the whole panel, about the importance of financial education and the importance of starting it early and getting kids to understand, personal finances, what's a budget, how to save, and why you should save. Now, for the bulk of the population that is now adult and working, I think the financial literacy ambassadors are actually the financial planning advisors and the investment advisors, and they should ideally conceive themselves as in that role of being the ambassador of this pension system, supplementary pensions, to their clients, and how to help them navigate and represent their interests in this world that is intimidating for most people. And in that sense, I think the importance of professional standards, competence, knowledge cannot be overstated. I mean, that's a profession that is key for the development of supplementary pensions, be it occupational pensions or personal pensions. Just help people navigate finance in a way that makes it familiar, that makes it less intimidating. And then I would relate that to John's question in this chat about the framing. And if we manage that, then it becomes much easier to explain to people, yes, okay, you have to ensure that you will have sufficient capital to not be a burden on your family in your old years. But in the meantime, while you accumulate, there is an opportunity to do something good with that money, to invest it where it matters to you, to pursue maybe an impact on the planet if that's what you want to pursue, or just generate more financial returns, and be able to leave something for your children when you die. In the meantime, and we're talking about very long meantime, I mean 20, 30, 40 years, you have an opportunity to do something with that money. And then, going back to financial advisors, I think that's something that people probably can't imagine by themselves. So helping them with good professional advice is key.
Thank you. Jana?
From my perspective, what I would like to add is that we are facing a cultural mindset barrier, I would say, when it comes to saving and pensions. And what works in such a case is the best is to bring in the financial education really in the very early stage of the human's development, and really bring it to schools, to families, to create a mindset that this is by default something necessary to build up, and why it's so necessary to build up. In Europe, we do have a tendency, not just in Europe, globally, right? Society has a tendency to come and look at the situation when it's becoming a little bit much more dramatic and critical. And we do have an opportunity to mitigate a lot of what's going to come later, what Roger was explaining today. So let's focus on it today. Let's make it a priority for financial education and literacy today. And the second point I would like to mention, I've heard an example from Iceland where they created a wonderful partnerships within the ecosystem, within the market, and the banks. They've understood that the citizens' main contact point is their local bank, where you have your bank account, and they created applications where the citizens could be tracking their investments through the application that they have with the bank. It's of course not created by the bank, but the collaboration between the various stakeholders will probably be very important in this space as well.
And perhaps just one more final question on my side to wrap up the discussion, and this is addressed to all of you. If you had to prioritize one concrete policy action in the next 12 months, what would that be?
If you allow me to begin, I would say push very hard financial literacy. I couldn't be more clear. And the other message was where I was also very clear: nothing happens without tax incentives. That's the 2 points I want to put forward.
Jana?
I need to say that for me, all of them will need to take place in parallel to make a really meaningful outcome. So there is not one single solution that can make things happen. They all will need to take place at the same time. Everything that we've discussed through financial literacy, taxation, tax incentives, integration of capital markets, blended finance tool, investment allocation for impact, so that we can really ensure that there is a long-term society and economy in Europe. All of it will need to take place in parallel, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much for your excellent responses, as well as for the questions received, as this clearly reflects the strong interest in the topic. I will now briefly highlight a few key takeaways from the discussions that we had today. So first, there is broad agreement that the Savings and Investment Union is a major opportunity, but also a complex balancing exercise. So more integrated capital markets are essential to mobilize long-term savings and support competitiveness, with pension funds playing a key role. But at the same time, pension systems remain rooted in national frameworks, with the primary objective being to deliver adequate and secure retirement income. So striking the right balance between integration and subsidiarities, and between economic objectives and fiduciary duty, is crucial. Then mobilizing capital is not only a supply side issue, so participation, trust, and outcomes remain key challenges. So Europe does not lack savings, but it faces a question of allocation, accessibility, and transparency. And this underscores the importance of financial literacy alongside simpler, better performing products and access to quality advice. On impact investing, there seems to remain a gap between ambition and reality, and with certain, let's say, regulatory constraints and data limitations still acting as barriers. So addressing these will be key to scaling up investment. And our discussion on the CE countries highlighted that there's no single starting point, but diverse pension models and market conditions mean that the Savings and Investment Union must remain flexible and inclusive. So finally, looking ahead, priorities include removing barriers to investment, improving outcomes for citizens, and aligning capital with long-term objectives. So ultimately, success will be measured not only by deeper markets, but by better outcomes for Europeans. With that being said, I would like to thank you all again, to all of our speakers for their contributions, and to all of you for joining us. And yeah, I wish you a great rest of the day.
Thank you also
Yeah, great.
from my end to our partners for this webinar, the panelists, and also to inform everyone that we will have this webinar recording available on our website if someone else wants to see it, revisit it, or if you want to share it to your colleagues. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.